the last time going to the doctor felt actually good? Today I'm joined by Chloe Harrouche, co-founder of the Lanby, a new kind of primary care experience that blends modern medicine with high-touch wellness, all in a beautifully designed space. Think concierge care meets longevity science with a team that's as focused on your lifestyle as they are on your labs. In this conversation, we talk about what's broken in traditional healthcare, how the Lanby is reimagining it, and what it takes to build trust and loyalty in this new wave of care. All right, let's get into it. So, welcome, first of all.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. So, what initially motivated you to launch the Lanby, especially at the intersection of wellness and medical care?
Yeah, no, great question. Well, I've always been in healthcare. I studied bioengineering when I was in undergrad, was in healthcare consulting after that. So medicine was always something I was very passionate about. But it wasn't until I myself was a patient that I realized just how important the wellness side was. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 23 years old. And from that experience, I saw, you know, the sort of craving that I had post treatment to be more proactive about my health, to take control. After being a patient, you almost feel like a victim. And so you want that sense of control back. You want to feel like you're the one that's actually driving your health forward as opposed to just waiting for something bad to happen to you. And so when I went to my doctors and said, what can I do now? I've done treatment. I've removed the cancer. How can I make sure this never happens again? And not just cancer, but how can I also make sure that the rest of my life is as healthy and prosperous as it can be? And they sort of just looked at me like, that's way outside my scope. Like, I'm focused on treating you. I don't know how to avoid this from happening, nor do I know anything about overall health. And so that's when I ultimately turned to primary care, hoping that that would be the solution, and realized very quickly that primary care today is a shell of what it used to be. And that's a very sad truth. So I sort of set out to create my ideal doctor's office experience, really thinking first about what are the reasons why primary care has fallen short due to systemic issues in healthcare. Like, why are we here, and how can we sort of work backwards from a first principles mentality to sort of create the experience and the value proposition that I think most younger people today who do know a lot about wellness and care a lot about their longevity, what does that look like for them?
Okay. And so you kind of touched a little bit about your own health journey and how it shaped your vision. Is there a lesson from that experience you wish more people in healthcare kind of understood?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most doctors are very well trained in medicine, right? Like, you go to medical school and you learn how to treat disease, how to remove the source of the issue, to treat the symptoms, especially. What they're not well trained on, and that's no fault of theirs, is wellness. Like, what are the things that you should be doing day to day to prevent disease? And so I think that the shift for the Lambie is really meant making a conscious effort to bring in providers that can not only speak to the medical side of things, what do you do when you actually have an issue come up, but really sort of how do you instead think about your health more proactively with nutrition, with exercise, with sleep, with general mental health, and with other things too, right? Whether it be supplementation or looking at your labs more extensively. So it's having sort of the complementary expertise around medicine, but also the additional training for our physicians to be able to assess your health more holistically, and with that preventive approach.
Love it. Love it. So you've built something pretty rare, a model that blends clinical credibility with high touch wellness. What have you learned about getting that right?
I think it's really about building that trust. So often I think people focus on having a one-stop shop where they offer the medicine and the wellness under one roof. I think the difference for us is that we really wanted to build trust with our members. And so we didn't necessarily focus on building out a spa where people can do infrared sauna and cryotherapy and acupuncture and some of the other like wellnessy things that people want out of a one-stop shop. Our focus was really on being that trusted guide for people to be able to prioritize what are the services that I should be investing in and where do I get those services. And there are a million places in New York City to go for acupuncture, to go to for, sauna, cryotherapy, PT, physical,
Cairo, as like
anything
it
else
goes on.
really, but, like, do we need to be the ones to offer that? Are we gonna be the best ones at that? Or do we really wanna focus on making sure that we can help people orient their care and figure out what is the right thing for them to focus on? Because we could all be doing a million things, but we also don't have unlimited time or resources. So we want to sort of be that trusted guide to tell people where to invest their dollars and their time. Same with supplements. We don't sell our own supplements. We instead focus on helping people find the right supplements for what they need constitutionally, right? Like looking at your labs and seeing, okay, you're deficient in this, or you're not necessarily deficient, but you're suboptimal. So let's start to think about how we can improve those levels, either with changes to your diet or your lifestyle or supplements. And so I think that what our members really appreciate about us and why we're able to maintain that level of clinical excellence with high touch wellness is because we're not trying to do everything. We're trying to really focus on the guidance and personalization.
Okay. So hiring and building the right clinical culture can be challenging, especially when the model is new. What kinds of people thrive at the Lanby?
I think it's two things. One is like, I think that we attract providers who have an itch to be more entrepreneurial or want to challenge the status quo. They're not satisfied with the type of care that they're being forced to deliver in, a conventional practice, and they want to be able to layer in some of the modalities that they're hearing about, whether it's through books or podcasts or conferences, and they don't feel like they have the flexibility or the autonomy to be able to flex that muscle and learn more, but also apply it into their practice. So I think that these are people who are actively searching for a new model of care, but don't necessarily feel like they're ready to go off on their own and start their own practice, because that brings in a whole other host of risks and stresses that I think a lot of providers don't want to necessarily take on, right? Like starting a new business is very hard. It's much easier to find a practice that's already practicing this type of care where you can just fit in. And then I think the other element is, we are still a startup in so many ways. And we expect that our providers have this level of adaptability and flexibility and also, intellectual curiosity and innovation to be able to participate in building the infrastructure of the Lanby. Because the only way that we can continue growing is that if we have buy-in from our providers to pivot as we start to see, and learn what our members want and what they appreciate, what they value, right? Like we need to stay close to that consumer to be able to really lean into the sides of our that resonate most with our members. And so having providers that are attuned to those reactions from their patients is really important, and also are able to adapt their approach to fit that need. And then also sort of being part of building out the infrastructure, whether it's through care protocols or, reassessing our tech stack, which I feel like we do all the time. These are the inputs that they offer to us as leadership to be able to make sure that we're staying ahead of the game.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. What's one small change you think traditional clinics could make to move toward more to like patient-centered care?
I mean, there's two things. One is, we very much believe that the insurance based system misaligns incentives between physicians and providers. Sorry, physicians and patients. The reason being that the way in which physicians or practices make money when they take insurance is just based on volume. So the more patients they see, the more procedures they complete, the more money they can make, right? And obviously, like that is misaligned with patients because they don't necessarily want to keep going to the doctor. They want to be healthy. So for us, the way in which we were able to get around that is say, like, let's not take insurance. Like, let's not try to pick this battle that we can't win anytime soon. Let's instead focus on building continuity and building this like ongoing approach where our focus is really on making you not only healthy, but also happy. Because in a membership, the way in which we're incentivized as a practice is by making sure that you renew. And so if you renew, that implies that you're healthy and happy, and that you want to continue having the support of the Lanby to allow you to take your health to the next level. So I think that on the incentive alignment is a huge like factor that I think a lot of practices don't really think about. Also, I mean, maybe they don't need to think about it because it's working for them and that's fine. But I think for the type of experience and relationship that we want with our patients, it's important for us to have thought about that. We're also delivering preventive care, which a lot of time insurance doesn't reimburse for. So again, it goes back to the type of practice that you want to build. And then the other aspect that I think is important to think about is physicians are not necessarily the best person for the job when it comes to prevention across the board, right? Like there are certain things that physicians are very helpful with when it comes to analyzing labs, when it comes to interpreting data and sort of creating sort of a more holistic narrative around a patient's health. But when it comes to lifestyle, whether it's nutrition or exercise or sleep, mental health, I mean they're not trained in these modalities and they're also, you know, not the best at helping provide the sort of practical tips to be able to help patients implement those recommendations. I would say the majority of physicians, when they see a patient that's dealing with bad metabolic health or cardiovascular health, they're like, just eat healthier, go to the gym. But that's not helpful. Like patients need a lot more guidance than that. They need to understand, like, okay, this is what my current day looks like. Where can I fit in going to the gym? And what are the types of exercises that I should be doing? And if I don't like working out on my own, but I also can't afford a trainer, what are the solutions that I can find? Or, I travel a lot for work, so it's really hard for me to eat healthy. What are some of the ways in which I can do that? And that's where a registered dietitian can be so helpful because dietitians are actually very, very clinically trained. So they have a clinical background. They're able to look at your medical history, have sort of a really sort of nitty gritty conversation with the physician around your health, but then also translate that into wellness. And so that's why having that complementary expertise on the team is really helpful to elevate the value and the scope of care that we can offer to patients.
It sounds like you're giving them, it's like helping them with a change in their sort of their lifestyle, because like you
Totally.
mentioned, it's like if you're too busy doing this, but this is what I'm doing, this is my life, this is how I live it. Like, how do I adapt? How do I change? Don't do it, or I stop doing it, or I
Yeah,
fall off. It's like, no, we want you to keep doing this. We want you to take better
exactly.
care of yourself. Okay.
Exactly.
So you've been testing some new ways to extend the Lambie's reach, like executive wellness offerings and thought leadership. What inspired that, and where do you see it going?
I think that our mission is really to be part of the conversation as well as delivering care, right? Like to your point, and this is why I think your podcast is great. I mean, you're helping to educate more providers out there about the importance of preventive medicine and the importance of wellness and the importance of longevity and how to sort of get that expertise and integrate it into your practice. And so for us, it's not just about being the only ones to deliver this type of care. It's also about educating people on the importance of being proactive about your health, whether that's a provider or a patient. A lot of times patients don't know what they don't know. What we see is that what compels people to join the Lanby is a very scary health event, or they saw their father or their mother pass away or have a stroke unexpectedly. And they're like, I don't want this to happen to myself. What can I do to be more proactive? Or they recently had a child and they're like, you know what? My lifestyle is not conducive to living a long, healthy life. I want to be around for when my kid gets married and, I want to be able to dance with my kids and go hiking with my kids. And, the weight that I've gained in the last 10 years is just not going to cut it. I can't keep living this life. So point being is like, it's always like some sort of event that prompts someone to take action when it comes to the Lanby. And what we try to do is just help people understand like, okay, even if you haven't had a scare, why wait until that scare happens? Like that scare could be really bad and then it's almost too late. We
Almost
would
too
so
late.
much
Yeah.
rather be part of the mix before you're looking to start a family, before you have a stroke, before you start to see your testosterone levels dip, before you start to deal with perimenopause, right? Like our approach is going to be that much more, or our care is going to be that much more effective when we have time to to implement the changes that we want to implement. And there's so much that people can do proactively. So I think for us it's about like being part of educating um more individuals about the value that we can offer and some of the tips that they can even be doing on their own before their members.
You had mentioned before, like finding the right doctors is a bigger challenge than demand. Like, what if you learned about building those long-term relationships with clinicians who share your vision?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reason why the supply is such an issue in terms of physicians is because we are looking for physicians who have the additional training and certifications in integrative medicine, functional medicine, longevity. And that takes a lot of time for physicians to go off, do attend conferences, attend courses. It's also a financial investment that a lot of physicians can't afford because they're in a lot of debt from school loans, et cetera. And so, you know, I think part of the issue is one, building relationships with the folks that have received that training. So even so when the time is right, like we end up being a natural fit. But also, I think it's about thinking ahead and seeing like how can we start to build our own training program so that more providers can come to the Lanby to start to practice this type of care and not necessarily have to go elsewhere first. So that's something that we're actively thinking about because I think it will help us sort of really mitigate the supply issue long term.
So it's kind of like instead of them going out and seeking these certain things that they need to learn, you provide that. Like you can come to a place where
Exactly.
learn it all, pick up, and make sure that you're investing in them and they're getting the right things that you want them to have as well to succeed.
Exactly.
So how do you see technology supporting your mission as you grow? I know you kind of touched like you're always looking at different technology and
Yeah.
so like sorry, whether it's maybe your app or diagnostics or patient communication.
Yeah. So technology has never really been a core focus of how we deliver care in that I didn't want to distract myself by building our own proprietary tech solution because no matter what I built, it wouldn't be as robust as an EHR or a patient management solution that's off the shelf. Even though they're not the exact experience that I wanted, I knew it would be a distraction for me to try to build my own thing. And it still would have its flaws. And so my goal was to sort of work with what was available for as long as possible until I had a very clear vision of what we wanted to be able to differentiate our experience in a way that would also not only improve the patient experience, but also really simplify the provider experience. So, the ways in which we use tech are obviously first and foremost, we have an electronic health record system, which is where we house all of our data, our patient data, our the patient's records. And for the most part, it's where we also communicate with external specialists. But then we have a layer on top of that that allows us to communicate with our patients and allow patients to be able to chat with their care team, also view their records, schedule visits, complete any intake forms that we need them to complete or surveys, et cetera. But that's really sort of a very bare bones solution. I think right now what we're looking to sort of figure out is like based on the fact that we also create these care plans for our members and our care plans are very comprehensive. They include all the recommendations on diet based on their lab results, exercise, supplements, specialist referrals, diagnostics. I mean, it's like everything that you
I don't
as a
think you
patient
ever see
need.
that anywhere.
Yeah. And so,
Usually
like,
just
there
like,
are a
here's
lot
your
of
lab.
yeah, there are a lot of patient management solutions that generate a care plan, but they're super rudimentary. Ours are incredibly detailed. So that was never a possibility for us to use. And we weren't willing to compromise on the quality of output just to be able to use an off the shelf solution. So we've been sort of creating care plans very manually. But what my goal would be is to be able to leverage tech to create more of an output using our historical data that we can then further personalize for patients and have that be shared and iterated upon over time. After every quarterly check-in, we like create a new care plan. This would be such a more of like an ongoing feedback loop between patients and their providers. So it's almost like a living, breathing care plan that is tech enabled as opposed to like a static document that we're constantly updating. So that's something that we're thinking about heavily and we're working on, but definitely not something that we're going to be able to turn around very quickly just because again it's not our bread and butter. Our focus was really on making sure that patients knew that the quality of care that they received was the priority. Like that's where we've invested our capital, is bringing on the right resources and talent. And then, of course, our goal is to be able to find or create the tech solution that can support that.
Is there a misconception about concierge, or membership-based care you wish you could clear up for the industry or public?
I mean, I think for the most part, the definition is accurate in that concierge care is um, providing patients with better access and more time with their provider. Um, I think the way in which we challenge the definition of concierge medicine is really around the 24/7, get the phone number of the doctor type of experience. Like our providers are not always on call. Our focus when it comes to concierge is really the modern approach, which is more geared towards wellness, prevention, longevity. So we sort of take the definition of concierge around more time and more access, and we sort of expand that into okay, how do we actually change the value of primary care so that it is more proactive, that we're checking in with you. We're not waiting for you to have something bad happen to you for you to follow up with us, right? Like we have a model that allows us to stay in touch with our members on a more ongoing, continuous basis, spend more time with them, but also layer in more expertise that is typically not deemed valuable in an insurance based model. And that's where I think we've sort of modernized the definition of concierge to be more geared towards what, we believe the modern consumer wants.
Hey, it's exciting. Okay. Uh, tell where can people follow your work or learn more about what's coming next for the Lanby?
So we have a podcast actually that is called Get Well Better. And that's where we interview specialists and even people on our team to help to educate around, what are some of the topics that people should be better aware of or more informed on, and also just cut through the noise of like what people might be hearing on social media or in the news about wellness trends that they really just want to get to the bottom of. So that's a really great way to sort of stay in the know of our philosophy of medicine without having to necessarily be a member. So that podcast you can sort of subscribe to either on Spotify or Apple, however you choose to listen to podcasts. And then we have our social media account, which is another great way to stay in the know. That's at the.Lanby. We also have a newsletter, which you can subscribe to on our website. And that's where we share great blogs that we've written that are also, again, a great way to educate yourself outside of, being a member. And then finally, if you do decide you want to actually experience the care of the Lanby, you could either become a member, which allows you to sort of take on us as your primary care, but also get all the other services that we offer. But then there's also another service that's more a la carte, and that's called Just the Labs. And that's a great service for people who are just looking for a one-time assessment on their labs. So we do a very extensive panel, and then with that, a 45-minute consultation to go through your results and provide you with recommendations. So we have two offerings, and both of those can serve different needs.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much for this, Chloe.
Of course, it was such a pleasure to chat.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Wellness Growth Show. If today's conversation sparked something for you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the stories, strategies, and insights from the front lines of wellness innovation. If you're a founder, operator, or health leader exploring growth into institutional markets and have a story worth telling, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out directly on LinkedIn or YouTube. And if you found this valuable, share it with a peer or post it online. You never know who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay well, keep moving, and keep building what matters.